now to get to the important next step of this program, which is Congressman Jason Chaffetz, who has, as I said, played an inordinately important role as a member of the Judiciary Committee and the, what I used to call Government Affairs Committee, which shows I've been around too long, Government Operations Committee. He got elected in unconventional ways. He worked for Governor Huntsman, has shown a really vibrant and dynamic ability to jump into important controversial areas and play a leadership role. And we are really happy to have him with us this morning. Congressman.
Well, thank you. Good morning. I do appreciate it. I'm Jason Chaffetz. I'm here with Troy Stock, who's in the back, who's counsel that has interacted with you. And I really appreciate this organization. I appreciate Ed and the influence that he has. I know he's very important to members around here, and you're well represented, and so we appreciate the invitation today. We got a lot of challenges here in this town. Washington, D.C., people say, oh, how's Washington? It's a mess. It's an absolute mess and a disaster. And but there's great opportunity. There is great opportunity. Now, one of the challenges, obviously, for this industry is education, because too many of my colleagues don't understand or appreciate how this fits into our economy, how it works. One of my favorite stories when I first got here, I was elected in 2008, so I really haven't been here too long. But when we first got here, there was an office, one of my colleagues who'd been here maybe a little too long, one of their staffers was bemoaning the idea because their office had just got a BlackBerry for the office. They weren't quite grasping how the BlackBerry might work, because they had one, and then the idea was if you went out, if you wanted to check it out, you could check it out and then take it with you, and they weren't quite grasping how this whole computer thing was really going to actually work, and how smartphones and other things were going to change the world and help them. But anyway, that's what we're up against. And in fact, when we went into the SOPA fight, I really appreciate Daryl Issa. I really appreciated Zoe Lofgren and Jared Polis, who I know is coming to speak with you later. In a very bipartisan way. You know, there weren't very many of us there that decided to take on that fight. And the plea that I really made to my colleagues was along this same vein, because I said, listen, with all due respect, you're about to perform surgery on the internet, and there isn't a doctor in the room. We never had a hearing with anybody who understands how this stuff works. And it's terribly irresponsible for you to actually vote in favor of this bill. If you don't know what DNSSEC is, you can't vote for this bill, because you don't know what it's going to do. And it's time to bring in some nerds and actually understand how this is going to work and what it's actually going to do to your industry. And that sort of, I thought, caught some of their fancy and created a little bit of concern with people that, maybe we don't know exactly what we're doing with this. And obviously we had some good results. Now, it's not just about defeating things. We got to be very careful, because there is a proper role of government, and finding that balance, as Ed pointed out, is one of our collective challenges. So we have some bills up on the floor this week. Senator Wyden and I, reaching a bicameral, bipartisan way, have introduced a bill that I really would like you to look at. It has to do with geolocation. It has to do with the limitation of government to come in and watch and follow you based on your geolocation. I mean, every device these days seems to be embedded with some sort of GPS device. That doesn't mean law enforcement should just be able to watch you in perpetuity without probable cause. One of the themes that we're focused on is the Fourth Amendment, unreasonable search and seizure. And we have to find a careful balance there. And so Senator Wyden and I have joined together and looked at this piece of legislation. We have a hearing in the middle of May. This would prohibit, again, law enforcement to tracking people without a search warrant, but it would also prohibit somebody surreptitiously from across state lines following and tracking somebody. Imagine a spurned lover who's figured out how to remotely maybe turn on that iPad tracking, follow your phone or follow your iPad or whatever. These types of things we've got to have the law catch up on. We also, in the cybersecurity realm, There's 4 bills up this week, literally today and tomorrow. I'm helping Darrell Issa with the FSMA bill, which really allows government agencies to chat with each other and share some information together, which we think would be a positive thing. We have to be able to figure out how to share this information with industry so that you know what's happening when these cyber attacks are coming from overseas. Our intelligence services are gathering all kinds of information. But at the same time, we're the United States of America, and we must be careful and vigilant in making sure that we don't overstep the bounds, that we don't have the NSA and others working domestically to tap into people's information. So those are important things. And the last thing, very briefly, I'll mention before we do whatever question and answer you'd like, that I've spent some considerable time on has to do with the immigration issue. Because as you're looking for talent and people and you're unable to fill some of those key jobs, and the law has to catch up with what we're doing. Now, I've advocated for a long time, hey, look, I want to lock down the border. I want to get tough on making sure that we secure the border. But I've also always argued that we have to fix legal immigration. If you don't fix legal immigration, you'll never, ever solve this problem. And so there's a way to do that. And I really do appreciate our leadership for allowing a young member to get in the middle of this fight. And we actually introduced and passed, not only out of the Judiciary Committee, but passed out of the House of Representatives, a Fairness for High-Skilled Immigrants bill. This bill gets rid of the per-country caps, and if you've been involved and engaged in this, the current law does not take into account proximity, size of country. None of those factors come into play. Basically, every country is limited with, there's 90 different visa categories. The limit is no more than 7% of any of those visas can go to somebody from a particular country. Pick any country. Well, we're obviously going to maybe have a few more people perhaps from India or China or something like that, as opposed to maybe Zambia or Switzerland. Some of these smaller countries that maybe don't produce the type of talent that in particular this industry needs in order to thrive. So we actually got that passed out of the House. It's sitting over the Senate, and hopefully they'll move on it at some point. But we have to pay attention to these issues as well. So with that, Ed, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, as long as that's what you want to do. So.
Some other areas you mentioned shows some bipartisan working together, and I think our industry sees ourselves as not really bipartisan, but nonpartisan. Many of the issues, and I used to joke, when somebody writes code, it works or it doesn't. It's not liberal or conservative or Democratic or Republican code. And a lot of our issues, I really do think should be, and we would hope would be able to be approached on a basis where people work together regardless of philosophy and party in many ways. And the fact that you played so well with the Democrats on the Judiciary Committee in that battle, you and others, I mean, it was great to see. And I just hope and I don't know how, I can imagine how optimistic you are that we'll be able to do that on a lot of other issues.
There are certainly partisan issues, and you see votes that come down on one side of the aisle or the other. But when it comes to this industry and these issues, I think Republicans have been a little slow to the mark. I see this as a great opportunity for me, but it really does take people who understand the industry and use the products. Part of it's generational. Some of my colleagues just have not grown up in this, and I understand that. I respect that, but it's here to stay. It isn't going anywhere. I do appreciate the approach that Speaker Boehner's taken. Very beginning, as soon as he became the Speaker of the House, very swiftly appointed a cybersecurity task force. Speaker was kind enough to appoint me to that. Very grateful for that. Mac Thornberry is going to be very important on these issues moving forward. Those of you from Texas, he is the point person given his role on the Intelligence Committee and on Armed Services. He's the person that the Speaker has appointed there. But you point out, you're right, these things are bipartisan. This safety and security of our nation is not something that one party or the other owns. I think Republicans can do a better job of making sure that we don't intrude into people's personal space. I've been a real critic of the TSA, for instance, and what they're doing at the airport and how they're doing it. I don't think we need to be looking at people naked in order to secure an airplane, and I think there's a better, smarter way to do that. But again, at the end of the day, it's still a very small group of people. You're talking about 435 people in the House, and when you all divide up into committees and everything else, usually these discussions are with a group about a third of the size of this. And that's what's amazing to me. If I've learned something in just over 3 years that I've been here, so few people raised their hands and became engaged. But those that do make the world a difference. And what you're doing in terms of touching base with your own member of Congress is so important, I can't even tell you. They do listen to people who are in their own districts. They do listen to the letters and input. The staff that you interact with is invaluable. I cannot encourage you enough to continue to do that. And you're well represented. This industry and this organization is very well represented. The people that are up on Capitol Hill on a regular basis. It's got to keep happening. It's constant, and it's going to grow. The more pervasive technology becomes, the more imperative it's going to be to get out there and keep educating. Because like I said, 98% of the members, they have no idea. They have no idea how to, they have no idea. So, anything else? Yes. Yeah.
The price of power and electricity is very important to the industry and
Yeah.
the rush to go renewable power. Maybe could you comment on the balance between achieving that and remaining competitive with our power prices here?
Yeah. Now we're going to get into some partisan stuff. This becomes a little bit more partisan. You start talking about energy policy. Yeah, it's terribly frustrating. I don't want to get myself in too much trouble, but I get very frustrated with what I call these radical environmentalists who impede our ability to do anything. I have one of the biggest wind farms in the nation is in my district. And yet their ability to expand in a place, it's so far away from any major population center. In this electricity feeds, almost all exclusively goes to Southern California. These environmentalists have come in there. We had an eagle or something hit one of these big windmills, and now they have to do a bird mitigation plan. They were delayed for about a year in expanding this because they were concerned about the prairie dogs. And with all due respect to the prairie dogs, when you put up a windmill, it doesn't take much space at all. We're talking about a few feet by a few feet. And but they literally have spent years delaying our ability to get what I consider green imperative energy. And this nation has to come to a grips with it. There has to be an adjudication process that allows people to go swiftly through it. I look at Utah. We have so many great resources in terms of coal and natural gas and oil shale. And yet every time we turn around, there's some lawsuit that sometimes takes decades to get through. And consequently, we're not making the investments. What's difficult to see is these rising fuel prices and rising energy. We're just not doing anything. We haven't built a nuclear power plant in over 30 years. Green River in Utah, in my new congressional district, they want to build one. But the regulatory process to get through that, we have 110, I think it's 110 nuclear power plants. Less than 20% of our electricity is nuclear. France, it's over 80%. This can be done. It can be done in an environmentally friendly way. There's dangers to it, but there's dangers with every type of development of energy. But when we're not even able to develop the green energy, that's where I think, come on, Democrats, Republicans, can't we just fight this back a little bit? I mean, we're impeded by doing anything. And that's what's terribly frustrating. So we think we have an energy. By the way, I've been very critical of Republicans and Democrats because since the Carter years, I don't think we've had a national energy plan. And so while I'm critical of President Obama, I'm really critical of the two President Bushes, President Reagan. President Clinton, we've never made this a national priority. When they started the Department of Energy, April 1st, 1977, we were importing roughly 30% of our petroleum. Now we're importing about 50%. I mean, talk about an agency that's fundamentally failed. Their mission, their objective was to wean us off our global dependence on oil. And it got worse, not better. And so we have to solve this. We have men and women who are serving overseas dying to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. We have men and women who are expending great tolls, and yet we have energy in our backyard and we're not willing to do it. So this is a long-term objective in Congress, and I think the president's failed along the way. I really do. And it's frustrating when you see 4 or 5. I said, oh, I got $4 gasoline in Utah. So he said, boy, I wish I could only pay $4. You know, they're California, they were paying about $4.75. So, ouch. That's painful. That's painful. Yes, sir.
Congressman, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You dealt with one aspect of intellectual property and overreach when it deals with and interacts with the software and high-tech space. On the other side of it, you have a patent system that doesn't function properly, or as properly as it should in our space, with proliferation of low-quality patents and really high litigation costs and the uncertainty that goes along with that. So I wonder if you could speak to your take on what's going on in the patent system, what needs to be done, and if, you know, any thoughts you have on that.
One of the things I was, the patent office itself needs to keep up in technology. I was surprised to learn, you know, that in the patent office, within the last 12 months, there was a whole section of the patent office that just got off a DOS operating system. They just got Windows for the very first time. They literally had DOS operating systems over there. It was unbelievable. These people looking at those green screens all day. They're woefully behind. The enforcement has been absolutely atrocious. You know, I asked the head of the patent office, so how many inspectors, how many people do we have in China? Do you know the answer to that question? What does the U.S. government have there? One person. There is literally one dude sitting in some office in China. I can't imagine what they're trying to do. So there is the enforcement mechanism. There is tort reform that I think is desperately needed in order to go through this process. I'm on the Judiciary Committee. I'm not an attorney. Now, usually that's applause line. Like when I talk at home about this stuff, they usually give me an applause line on that one. But it's funny, when I met with Speaker Boehner and we were talking about committee assignments, and the speaker said, well, what about judiciary? And I said, well, I'm not an attorney. And he said, exactly. That's why I want you to be on judiciary. So we need a few non-attorneys. But certainly the tort reform process is messed up. We had this patent bill move forward. It'll be interesting to see how that actually plays out. The enforcement side of things. The other thing that we are dealing with, it's a little off what you're asking, but supply chain management and how our Border Patrol and customs people deal with this. We had, and I'm not sure, Ed, if you were at this one, but one of the people from the semiconductor industry was talking about how when chips come in and they think, they're checking them, they have a policy to blacking out the serial number. Well, so they will have only 30 days to hold this shipment. They will then call the company and say, is this legitimate? And they say, well, we can't tell if we can't see the serial number. It's just, there is not this cohesiveness in understanding how we can work with the industry. And the supply chain management issue really affects the cybersecurity. We do have things that are being shipped or trying to be shipped into this country that are already embedded with surreptitiously being adapted moving forward. So the issues are plenty. If it was easy, I'm sure they would have tackled a long time ago. But I got to tell you, myself and others, we're going to rely upon this group and this association and your input to say, hey, these are the problems. This is how we're going to clean it up. So I wish I had a good, sweet, simple answer for you, but it is a problem. It is definitely a problem. So I'm getting right near the finish line. We have a bill up on the floor And I have the very first amendment, and that markup starts there with Darrell Issa at 9 o'clock. So I'm getting near the finish line. Listen, thank you for your involvement, your participation. Keep doing it. I got to tell you, it is so. Congress has the ability of destroying your lives. So let's make sure that never, ever happens. But it takes a very proactive nature. I appreciate your participation in this. It really is valuable. What these people do up here makes all the difference in the world. So thanks for inviting me, and thanks for having me here. And I do appreciate it. So thank you. Thank you.